Okay, Mr. Whittington, thank you for coming in today. Can I get you a water? No thanks. I like a dry mouth. You... what? I don't know why I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. Oh, that's okay. So you're interviewing for the customer service position. Yeah. Hey, before we get started, I wanted to disclose that I have ADHD. Okay. And I suffer from time blindness. What's that? It means I'm bad with time, so I'm gonna be late a lot. Is that cool? No. Why not? Because it's important that we have people logged in by 8 a.m. But I just told you I have a disorder. I'm asking for an accommodation. Yeah, we won't be able to grant that. Racist? ADHD isn't a race. Oh, now you're an expert on ADHD. Okay, I think we could just end the interview now. Oh, okay. So when can I expect to hear from you? About the job? Yeah, now. I think we're just probably gonna go in a different direction. Because I have ADHD? No, not because you have ADHD. Well, it sounds like it. And guess what? You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Oh, okay. Yeah, what's your lawyer's name so I know who to look for? Robert Kardashian? OJ's lawyer? No, he just, a coincidence. It's a common name for lawyers. Sure, okay. Well, I'll be sure to look out for Robert Kardashian's letter, okay? Thanks.
Is ADHD an excuse? No. All right, let's talk about it.
First off, what does that even mean? I mean, we all know what an excuse is, but let's get technical. These aren't real. Excuse. Noun. Something offered as justification or as grounds for being excused. Justification. Noun. An acceptable reason for doing something that justifies an act or way of behaving. Don't you love when a word uses itself in its own definition? We have enough to rephrase the question. Is ADHD an acceptable reason for doing something and grounds for being excused? Well, I guess when you phrase it that way, no. Still no, not when you do something that produces a negative outcome. Here's the crux of it. You are responsible for the outcomes that you create. Is it true that you have more working against you, that it's harder for you to arrive at the good outcome? Yes, but you are responsible for the outcomes you create. And an excuse does not change this. I just noticed I nicked myself shaving. But Eric, I have a disorder. That doesn't sound very fair. I know it doesn't. Trust me. I live it every damn day. Yes, it's harder. When you have ADHD, things are harder. That is the nature of this cruel game. But they're not impossible. While it may be impossible to go about things the way other people would and arrive at the good outcome, there's always a variable that you can control that will affect the outcome. And that variable is process. One of the big differences I see between ADHDers and neurotypicals is that normies seem to be able to rely on their automatic functions more. Take brushing your teeth, for example. A person without ADHD can just do it automatically, morning and night, without having to think about it. With ADHD, on the other hand, it doesn't seem to happen that way. Does that mean it's okay for people with ADHD to not brush their teeth? No. That wouldn't be a good thing to do for health reasons or socially. Does it mean it's impossible for people with ADHD to brush their teeth consistently? No, of course not. But to make it happen, you might need to go out of your way to set yourself up to actually do it. Put your toothbrush on top of your phone, on top of your nightstand, so when your alarm goes off first thing in the morning, you grab it. Process. It's when we assume that it's just going to happen automatically, like we observe in others, that we get into trouble. What I believe is that us ADHDers aren't taught this. In school, we're expected to do things how the other students do. We're expected to rely on automatic functions that don't exist in us. But because it's assumed they do, and when compared to others, we often get brushed off as being lazy or even dumb, instead of being taught how to address the process. Furthermore, because we're not taught this, we're often led to believe that these unfounded assumptions are actually true. Then we assume that things are actually impossible for us. And that's dangerous because when things are possible, we're in control. When we believe they're not, we give that up. We accept that we can't help but produce that negative outcome. We accept that ADHD is an excuse. Right now, you might be thinking, well, that doesn't make sense because you can get accommodations for ADHD. And doesn't that inherently justify ADHD as an excuse? No, because what you're actually doing in using accommodations is affecting the process to create positive outcomes. But there's a caveat. An accommodation is really an agreement. You are requesting changes to a process to make you more effective, and those changes usually involve other parties as well. In school, they may be minimal. Maybe you get some more time on tests and your teacher has to stay in the classroom a little bit later. Big deal. At work, on the other hand, it becomes a little more transactional. Remember the time blindness girl? The one who was crying because she thought she was being discriminated against because a company wouldn't hire her under her contingency that she could be late to work every day? A hiring manager who's looking for any reason to distinguish a good prospect from a bad one is going to look at her and look at someone who's going to be on time every day, and 10 times out of 10, choose the person who's going to be on time. Alternatively, if we imagine time blindness girl had been working for this company for a little while, already proved her worth, then had a conversation with her boss to the effect of, hey, if you let me come in a little bit later, I will perform better, then it's negotiable, and the employer may be willing to grant that accommodation. The extra work required to be on time should have been her responsibility until she was in a position to negotiate. And the reason why she got so much criticism for being entitled was because she was trying to put the responsibility of her problems on other people without offering them anything in return. What about your legal protections? Because here in America, under the ADA, employers are required to provide reasonable accommodations to their employees with ADHD. Yes, but let me finish. As long as it does not create an undue hardship for the employer.
That sounds a little subjective.
Now, for a lot of employers, having butts in seats at a specific time is a requirement of the job, and they would argue that to change that would create an undue hardship. Does it actually? In a lot of cases, probably not, right? It's probably more like, well, if I let time blindness girl come in late, everyone's gonna wanna come in late, and I don't wanna deal with that. And listen, I'm not saying this is necessarily fair. The point I'm getting to with all of this is even though you do have legal protections, there's always going to be a human element to all of this. And your best bet is always going to be to think about your approach to accommodations transactionally. And so you know I'm not just talking for the sake of talking, I'm gonna give you a specific example of how I went about asking for an accommodation at work.
The year was 2018. I remember it like it was yesterday.
I had been working for this company for a few years and already established myself as valuable. There were unique things that I brought to the table, particularly around process improvement that made our operations more efficient and effective. But I was having a really hard time getting my together in the afternoons. So one day, I pulled my boss aside and told him that I had ADHD and that my energy levels were super low at the end of the day. And because of that, my symptoms were exacerbated and it was hard to be productive or focus on anything. I felt comfortable saying that, you see, because I knew, he knew, that despite that, I was still producing for the company and adding value. Just not as much as I felt that I could have. I then asked him if I could come into the office an hour earlier and take an additional hour for lunch so I could go to the gym and get my energy levels up so I could focus for the remainder of the day. He granted me that one wish, because even though he would lose me for an hour in the middle of the day, when we would have important meetings, he'd have a better employee for the remainder of the day. It was a fair give and take. Translate this to other areas of life and the same logic applies. If you're having issues in your relationship because of your ADHD and you just ask your partner to pick up your slack, that isn't fair. That is not a reasonable accommodation. However, if you approach it like a transaction and ask your partner to help you out with certain things in exchange for you doing certain things for them to help them out, that's a different story. You're not making ADHD an excuse. You're identifying a problem, addressing the process, and offering a mutual exchange. Is ADHD an excuse? No. Telling yourself it is only going to hurt you. If ADHD is making things feel impossible, address the process to control the outcome. Asking for an accommodation is one way to address the process, and it's always helpful to think about it as a transaction, because regardless of the perceived fairness on your end and even your legal protections, there's always going to be a human element that you need to consider. That's the perception around how your moves are going to affect others. None of this is easy. Again, we're not taught this. We're just kind of left to figure it out on our own. But my reason for making this video is to help you understand or remind you that getting the desired outcome, the good outcome, is possible.
Thanks so much for watching my video. Subscribe, hit the like, hit the bell, subscribe.
See you next time. Love you.